red flags to avoid. Well, luckily, like I said, I haven't had too many bad experiences, but you will get people a lot of the times, and this is with any group dynamic, where it's like their way or the highway. And that doesn't always fly. And luckily, at least in the indie space that I've seen, a lot of that behavior isn't tolerated.
Hello, folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a show about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I'm your host, Michael Vadney, and today I am sitting with returning guest G.J. Terral, author of the Binding Tenants trilogy and the upcoming He Who Ate the Wild, which is currently or about to be or just started on Kickstarter, so go check that out. But welcome to the show, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Happy to be here. I just realized, how, because of the way I title things, it makes it very easy to slip up. There's a lot of the Binding Tenants trilogy, a lot of expletives, and I don't know. I feel like it's just really easy to trip. But you did great. You did great.
Thank you. I need that encouragement sometimes. But last week we had you on. We were talking about you. Just shooting the shit, talking about your career and your writing journey so far. But today we actually have a topic in mind, and we wanted to talk about book communities and book collectives and just, reaching out to other people as part of this journey that we're all doing in the reading and writing community. And the first thing that I actually wanted to ask is, why was this one of your suggestions?
Right. Basically because I'm not qualified to talk on anything else. No, I think it was my suggestion just because, I don't know, finding a community is really important, I think. Finding a collective where you can get actionable feedback from peers in your space, doubly so. So when I published in May of 2024, Bloodwoven, I was not in any sort of collective. I published, and I was hoping for the best. And then me and a few other buddies saw the Break-Ins, who were sort of a big group in the indie space. We saw what they were doing, and we saw that in a few different sections of the indie space that were getting a lot of love and boosting each other and helping each other out externally. And we were like, well, man, that'd be cool to be a part of something like that. So a lot of just like, oh, that'd be cool. And then Dave Lawson reached out to me. I was on vacation floating the river in Austin, and he had made a post about making a collective of some sort. And I was like, oh, well, actually, yeah, because I had interacted with Dave very briefly on a blog called Bert's Library, where we both did like a guest review and a few other things. And I was like, you know what? I think that sounds really cool. And so Dave founded the Secret Scribes, which we ended up having like 12 plus members from all around the world. And it was a lot of, post their work in progress, get feedback on maybe social media posts that we thought about doing, X, Y, and Z. There's just a lot of communication. And so that's why I really recommended it, because I was like, finding a group and being a part of it is really, I think, helpful. And you can go it alone. A lot of people do. But it's good to have, if not a group like that you're part of, a critique group at least, or something of that nature. And I think a lot of authors don't even think about that. So that's why I suggested it as a topic, because clearly I can spend a lot of time talking about it. So
it's a good topic. And I think it falls into the category of things, the big dumpster of stuff that we don't think about while we're writing the book, because we're writing the book and we're like, this is the goal, is to write the book. But outside of that, there are so many other hats that we have to wear. And finding this community and this collective is where you can get a lot of feedback and ideas for how to do everything, because there's a lot to learn.
100%. And you also have like different kinds, right? So I mentioned the Break-Ins. They sort of took a step back, I think late last year, from doing a bunch of like social media posting, and they're more just like friends who hang out, or at least from what I heard, hang out online socially. And I think a few of them still, they still boost each other because they're still friends and stuff. But it's more centrally focused on them versus like outwardly focused to, boost that kind of stuff. So Secret Scribes, we were doing a lot of boosting as far as just like, hey, I'm going to make a post. Early engagement, because of algorithms, is important? Do you mind like sharing, commenting, liking, that sort of thing? So it's good for that. It's also good, like I said, for finding critique partners that you trust, right? I made it a point to try and read, at least one book from every member of my collective, of the collective I was a part in, just to make sure that, I'm kind of, I don't know, I feel kind of weird saying it, but I don't want to just boost books to boost them, in the sense of I wanted to understand what I was supporting, because there's a chance that maybe it's really not a good book. Luckily, I didn't have that problem. I did, at least enjoy basically every book in that group that I read. And then sometime last year, we had a little bit of a branch off, and I'm still with the Secret Scribes. We still chat and talk and stuff, but I'm also with Willow Wraith Press, who is a sort of founded, there we go. Founded by Bill Adams and Dewey Conway, and the idea is that maybe someday there'll be like an actual small press, but right now it's just another collective where we were trying to do reviews, trying to do articles, trying to do just different things while also still supporting each other.
But
sorry.
No, sorry. I just didn't know if that was the end of your answer. He's like, hey, I'm out. I'm done. Out. I don't need to do this anymore.
Just imagine like 40 minutes of just the screen. You're like, well, that was weird.
We'll bring the Rumpadump cat back from the last episode. That's what we'll do, and just entertain the internet with cats.
Yeah,
it's a recipe for success, I hear. Yeah. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because having people around you to help you is absolutely necessary. Like, you can do this alone, but it is incredibly hard to do so. So how important would you say it is to find like a small niche community versus just being part of the greater book community at large?
Yeah, I'm not really too sure, because I think it varies by person, right? Some people, like me, I'm actually a fairly solitary person. So while I enjoy being part of these Discords and stuff, I think even if I didn't have the kind of net and wall to bounce ideas off of and the friends that I've made, like, I'd probably still be friends with them, and communicate with them, but it wouldn't be, I think I would still just do fine. You know what I mean? But then you have like some people where it's like, this is their community, and it, they need it and they want it, and it really helps them get through like their day-to-day or their normal job, having these like friends that you've made online. And so the indie community as a whole is vast and huge, and I don't think we see all sides of it at one point ever, because you'll see a book take off on Instagram and it's crickets on X or Blue Sky or things like that. There's different pockets and different niches, like you said. So to try and put it a little bit more succinctly, I think having a core group, especially, and I'm going to keep going back to it, people that you can bounce your ideas off of, get critiques from, get early feedback from, is integral, right? Because it saves you so much time in the long run, especially if you've read their work, you can trust them and their opinion. Yeah, I highly, highly recommend it.
So what platforms or online spaces do you suggest for people discovering like-minded authors and readers?
Yeah, so I found basically all the ones that I'm in right now are from Twitter, like X, but Instagram, Reddit is actually a really good one for finding just feedback in general. Go to r/fantasy writers. You can post your first sample page, stuff like that. And then you can, I've made a few friends from that. One group that I made was at a conference. I did the 2022 Writing Excuses cruise, and I was paired up with some other authors. We like sort of made our own like little critique group while we were on the boat, paired up with them. And, when it was time to leave, we were like, hey, why don't we make a Discord and we'll just like stay in touch. And so we're not active in it basically at all anymore, like any of us, but we do still stay in touch. And, that was one of the first ones that I had been a part of and I really enjoyed. And then there's in-person ones that you can do too. I know plenty of authors who are in there, like a writing workshop locally, and they make friends that way. it's just like you said, writing is a very solitary thing, but you got to let people in, and it's only for your benefit most of the time. It's for their benefit too, obviously, but it in my opinion, it does more good than it could possibly harm, to get a good core community.
I would agree. And this is one of those things where you tend to get as much out of it as you put into it.
100%. Yes. Yeah, that's a great point, because we have, I've been now in like 3 different groups, right? And these 2 ones, sometimes you just have people who don't really contribute much, and then they end up leaving and feeling like they wasted their time or they got nothing out of it. And it's exactly what you said, you get out what you put in. People don't want to engage. And it's the same with like public spaces on Twitter and stuff. You've got people who like have gotten a reputation for themselves for being like, oh, hey, buy my book, and that's all they care about. They don't want to make friends, and that's okay. Not everybody has to make friends. I don't pretend to be friends with everybody, because I don't have the energy for that. But you also really shouldn't just be, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, you shouldn't just be out there trying to sell your book at every occasion. You really, more than that, you're trying to sell yourself, right? And that starts with by being a genuine person 9 times out of 10. And it starts by actually engaging in conversations and getting to know people. It doesn't start with, hey, this is the book I wrote, you should buy it, because not everybody online is your customer as much as you might want to treat them that way. It's just not how it works. And a lot of people know that, and a lot of people see that, and they don't appreciate it, but it is what it is.
No, I agree. There's something to say about building the relationship, not just like one-on-one, but just with an audience in general, about being like, hey, this is me. I'm a genuine human being, not just a producer of a product.
That's why, I'm running that Kickstarter, and it's as much about building a community for the project, and for putting yourself out there as a person. I was on Nerdy Nebula, and we talked. Yeah, we talked.
I was watching that episode.
It was a good episode. Ben Galley and Ira Brand, super knowledgeable about it. So it was really good getting feedback from them, and also kind of affirmation from them, like, okay, it sounds like I sort of know what I'm talking about because I've done research, and that helped me feel more confident in my page and stuff. But yeah, yes, you're selling yourself to an extent, but it's about building community and getting people excited for you because of what you're doing. These personalities you're able to kind of put out. I think if you see someone like positive who's nice, and maybe they wrote like an okay book, you're still more likely to support them because you want to support them as a person, even if you don't ever get to the book or something like that. That's a lot of times how I buy my books, because I don't do a lot of like hauls all the time and stuff, but I'm like, oh, you know what, that person's actually, they're engaged in the community, they're a positive person. I've seen something about their book 9 times out of 10. It takes like 7 touches for you to, purchase a product sometimes, and it's like, okay, I've seen that enough times, I know they're not a jerk, let me go ahead and support them.
What kind of red flags should you be looking out for when looking to join an author or reading group to avoid like toxic dynamics?
Right. A reading group is also a great point, because there's so many other like buddy read channels and places that you can find to like share things that you love, because at the end of the day, I would say most of us who write fantasy also love fantasy, right? You want to read the good fantasy books, you want to find them, and so that's an excellent point about reading groups too. But red flags to avoid, well, luckily, like I said, I haven't had too many bad experiences, but you will get people a lot of the times, and this is with any group dynamic, where it's like their way or the highway, and that doesn't always fly. And luckily, at least in the indie space that I've seen, a lot of that behavior isn't tolerated, in the sense of like, you don't really have to worry about it happening. It can happen, it probably will happen, but I just really haven't seen it. Or the one thing I've seen the most of, which still isn't even that often, is authors not taking feedback very well. And so that's just about like knowing the person that you're interacting with. Hopefully you're at a kind of sort of stage where you can have that conversation with them, and them not be like, oh, well, this is blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, hey man, you're not the second coming of Brandon Sanderson. Let's bring things back down to reality, and let's come at this from a good angle, you know, like, so let's see, what are some other red flags? I don't know. I would say if people are really just trying to sell all the time is like a pretty bad one. And you see that even in like private discords, you know, people will just ping, they have no interactions, but they just want you to buy their book, and they don't really want to put in any effort into communicating or getting to know you. And that's not great. If it's a dead group, in the sense of like, you probably don't want to put too much time into a group that isn't interacting. You know, maybe you feel like, oh, this is the only group I found and I really like these people, but they're not, you know, engaging at all. That's a sign that maybe you shouldn't really put your time into that, and you should maybe try and find another group of people to chat with, you know?
Have you found that in-person meetups or online meetups tend to be more effective for creating like lasting relationships? And I say that in the year of 2026 where everything is online.
Yeah, no kidding. Everything is online. I would say in person to an extent. So it's complicated. So I've met at like author conventions and stuff. I've met authors and, you know, maybe readers and other people, and we interact, and you can have a really positive interaction. But at the end of the day, even if you link up online, that doesn't mean that, you know, y'all are suddenly friends, or like, oh, this is your new like BFF, this is your new group. So I think in the long run, those online interactions probably last a little bit longer, feel a little bit realer. You know, I've got my friends that I've had since I was, you know, 18, 19, and we talk every day and stuff, but I probably end up talking to like my author friends that I've made more, just because Discord is so accessible. You know, we're always chiming in with, like, I got some new art today that I was super excited about. I got to send that to the group. I don't send that to my friends, like my other friends, because they're just not as excited about that kind of stuff as I am. And that's okay. So I would say it really, man, I keep going back to this, but it just depends. Yeah, it's one of those things where it depends on who you meet, what the vibe is like in person, and if that translates to, you know, online, because most of the time you're going to be interacting with the people online.
So say you are a beginner and you've just recently joined a group. How can you meaningfully contribute when you don't really know a lot of people yet? You haven't really gotten your writing career off the ground yet.
If people are offering like, hey, I'm looking for somebody to read X, Y, and Z, you know, see if you can commit to that. It's, you know, sometimes maybe it's a lot to read. Maybe you don't have the time for it, and that's okay. But you can let them know like, hey, I can read, you know, maybe the first 5 chapters and let you know what I think. Or if they just ask for an opinion on, hey, does my cover art look good? You know, you can chime in like your opinion, because the whole idea is that you're supporting each other, and support comes in many different ways, right? And so just even when you're brand spanking new, the thing is you still have an opinion, right? Like you're gonna see a piece of art and think like, oh, that looks kind of wonky, and you can share that, and you really, really should, because you don't want a group of all like yes men, right? Just being like, oh yeah, that's great. Oh, we're so good at this. That's not how you get better at anything, right? You want people who have differing opinions and who have different lived experiences, and you can't always find that, but when you do, it really works out and it really clicks. And then if you're new, I would say don't be afraid to speak up, right? Like if you find yourself in a group you were invited in, or you and your buddies decide to form one, you know, don't be afraid to try and have your opinion be heard, because, you know, you never know. You might be a part of that group and it turns out you're the best writer in there. You know, you just never know. And so maybe you're really good at giving feedback and you can lean in on that. So that would be what I would suggest for people who are like maybe anxious about it, because it can be overwhelming when you don't know people and you're now in this new Discord server, or if you're in this new like meeting call Zoom or something, and it's like, oh man, I'm just going to tuck in and keep to myself. But I mean, that's not really how you make friends, you know. There's nothing wrong with putting yourself out there.
There's something special about a group of people that are coming together for, one, camaraderie, but then two, also just for self-improvement. Like, I absolutely love that. And that's what we're doing here in the writing community, is that we're all trying to get better at writing. We're all trying to create better quality books and stories and packaging, and we're all just trying to help each other do it. Like, I am not a religious person, but it makes me think of this phrase from the Bible where it's iron sharpens iron, and I absolutely love it. It's just this idea that we're all making each other better.
100%. And, you can do that solo, but it might take longer. I think it's Stephen King who, I might be butchering this, but he's like, you write the first draft with the door closed. Second draft, you need to open it and let people come into the room so essentially let people see what you're working on, because as an individual, when you're that close to your own project, you're probably not seeing its flaws, right? There's a very, if you are, then you're better than probably 8 out of 10 of the people who write, of authors. So yeah, you gotta let people in, and whether that's, a paid beta service, or if you find some beta readers, or again, I highly suggest, a lot of these Discords basically start as like critique partners, right? It's just find people who you can swap your work with. And, I think a lot of new authors are worried like, oh, they're going to steal my work. They're going to steal my idea. They're going to take my concept. You see that online all the time, people worried about that. And that's just not the case. I will say, with AI being as prevalent as it is, maybe it's a little bit more of a reason to be concerned about something like that being possible because of scraping and junk like that. But I just don't think most of the people in the community are looking to do something like that. Especially when I started, chatting with people. Never be afraid of giving out your ideas, because ideas are a dime a dozen. An idea is nothing. It's the final product that really matters. You have these different stories like we talked about last week. Is a lot of these epic fantasies are very similar, right? As far as like large scale idea of epic fantasy, and it's how they're executed that makes them unique, right? And so it's the same idea with the idea. Is it doesn't matter. Yeah, your idea might be really novel and really kind of cool and unique, but it's how you sell it and tell the story that really matters. And so don't be afraid to get into those groups and ask for feedback and ask for opinions. I'm doing 2 beta reads right now for people. I've been reading for Natalie Kelja. I think I'm pronouncing her last name right. It's a kind of sci-fi that's attached to her like main series. And then ZB Steele just sent me Rising Gale. So I've got, two beta reads, and I had just finished a beta read for my buddy Alex on his upcoming murder mystery fantasy, and I had just done a beta read for Bill. And so, as busy as you are as an author, it doesn't hurt to try and read other people's works, because a lot of times that's how you'll find something that you don't realize that you're doing, but you might not like. You might see something and be like, oh, you know what? I think I've been doing that and I don't like it here, so I probably don't like it in mine. Let me go find it in my work and, fix it from there. It's a great way to test your editorial chops. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like, I feel like editing other people's books makes you a better writer. There's many different ways to become a better writer. The number one is definitely write. Just always write. That's going to make you better. But reading other people's things, and then intentionally reading other people's things with the intent to find what makes this work, what makes this doesn't work, is going to translate to your own writing, because you'll internalize that stuff and become better. And you can't do that without community. You can't get access to those beta reads and those ARC reviews and those analytical discussions of stories without a community.
I highly recommend it, especially because, like you said, it's that intentionality where, anyone can read, So before I started writing Cracks of the Deepest Black, I took the First Law, I took Before They Are Hanged, I took the Lucanus trilogy, and I took one other book, and I read all those openings, and I just, by hand, I just copied the line, like line by line, so that I could get a feel for the way that the sentences were structured and why they were structured that way and things like that. And I don't think it translated one for one, because that's not how that works, obviously. But it was a really cool experience that I really recommend people give a try. Take your favorite books or take books in the genre that do well and, write them out as if you were writing it to see what they're doing. Break the paragraphs where they break it, check their sentence structure, the punctuation, stuff like that. So that's something that you can do solo. But where you really flex your sort of skills is when you're reading other people's works and you see, this sentence doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? It doesn't work because either they're trying something metaphorical and it's getting lost, the subject's getting lost in the action, the staging is a big thing, and it's a big thing that I suffer with, is like, where are these characters and what are they doing and why are they doing it? Sort of like scene direction. And you get all of that and more when you start reading for other people. It's really cool because you can, especially if you're new, you're going to feel yourself start to level up, which is a really cool experience if you haven't done it.
When you're really early on, there's so much improvement that can be done just by interacting with people, by getting immediate feedback. I think that's what's important about community, is that immediate feedback loop that you can find in a close niche people who are all just trying to get better.
100%. It's, to an extent, it's a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yes, I love that phrase so much.
Yeah, and I think to indie, it does apply. A lot of people think it kind of doesn't, but when indie books kind of break out and they get recognized, we talked about how there is, the worst trad is better than the worst indie, but the best indie is as good as the best trad. And I think that still applies even when you're talking about the rising tide, because you start to get more eyes on indie books when an indie book does well, or when it kind of breaks out. People are like, oh, you know what, maybe I will give indie a try. And maybe they don't find the best books, and that's okay, but maybe they decide, you know what, I can start supporting indie more. So being part of beta reads and being able to give that kind of feedback is my favorite thing about it, because I just like reading and I like helping others improve. So anytime I have the bandwidth for it, I try to do like beta reads and arc reads and stuff like that. With a newborn, I don't have all the time in the world, but it is something that I enjoy doing, and I really earnestly recommend people give it a try. If they haven't done beta reads before, like, just reach out. People are online all the time. Even if you're not part of a group, you'll often find like call outs. Like on ZB's arc forum, he had one of the kind of questions was, would you want to be a beta reader? Because authors are always looking for more readers at all stages of it. I've done alpha reads, I've done beta reads. I can't recommend it enough.
And just creating that community also creates opportunities for you as a writer, as an author, because when you create these relationships with people and they're now thinking of someone like, oh, I'm looking for someone to be a promotional partner with me, or I want to co-author something. And wait, there was that one guy who beta read my story who had really insightful feedback for me. I bet he can write some good stuff. Let's get together and do something. Like, yes, we are all here. We're all being friendly and we're all just trying to get better. But we're all also here to be successful and try to get our books out there to people. So it's okay to be friendly and okay to be looking for friends, but it's also okay to be like, hey, we're here for an opportunity. You just have to not be a dick about it.
Yeah, 100%. If an opportunity presents itself, don't be like, oh, I don't want to step on anybody's toes, which I think a lot of people have that mentality. But it's like, if a good opportunity arises, you should absolutely take it. The only reason I was able to get on Nerdy Nebula with Bengali and Ira was because of ZB, right? I told him, I reached out to him because we're buddies, and I was like, hey, is there a show that you're having that I could possibly be a part of? If not, it's completely cool. Just wondering if there's anything coming up. And he was like, yeah, well, let me see. And found out, yeah, we're able to make this happen. And so you don't make friends for the benefits they can give you. Like, obviously you make friends to make friends, but in that space, there can be opportunities that open up because of that. So it's a good reason just not to be so insular. Opportunities, much like with anything, can happen just because they happen, even if you're not part of a group. But the chances of it getting out there when you are part of a group, when you have a collection of people who know you as probably a good person and know that you're probably a good writer, those opportunities start to expand.
So you're joining all these communities. How do you balance participating in multiple communities without feeling overwhelmed or burnt out or feeling like it's another job that you have to do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The Secret Scribes have been a little bit quieter lately, which is completely fine. We're still chatting, and Ari Sanders is sending us a bunch of updates about his work in progress. And Yeah, I mean, we still talk a bunch, but I think it sort of comes in waves, right? Especially if you're part of multiple groups where it's like, oh, I'm spending more time talking to these guys, or we're updating more on this side, or, my last, I guess, 2 beta reads have been kind of mixed because like some of us are in both of those groups. It's just like slightly different goals with what the collectives were going to do. And so in that, it's like, yeah, I don't really feel like I'm splitting my time too much. But I could definitely see that being an issue. And if you're ever feeling burnt out or pulled in too many different directions, as much as I think a collective and a community is good and not necessary, but definitely hyper beneficial, it's okay to take a step back. Because like social media burnout's real, work burnout is real. And if at any point you're like, oh man, I just need to take a break, take a break. Micro Birdie, author of The Traders We Are, he was with Willow Wraith Press basically from the beginning, way before I was with him. And he's been on a sort of hiatus for a while now just because he was dealing with a lot of stuff. But last I heard, he's writing again, and maybe he'll consider joining the group again. But no, he's a great dude. Highly recommend his work. But took a step back because he needed to, and that's what you got to do.
For a lot of us, writing is secondary to everything else that we have to do. Like, we have a lot of responsibilities. We have our day jobs. Most of us have our day jobs. This is not what's putting food on the table for us. We also have our responsibilities to family. Like, you just had your first kid. There's a lot of things you have to deal with, and it's okay if you need to take a step back from promoting and learning and just trying to help each other out. You got to take care of yourself. This is a long haul, and you got to stay healthy for it.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. And you just, you got to stay healthy for it. So burnout is absolutely real, and taking a step back, not a problem. And so, I think for me, if I ever feel like I'm investing too much time in one group, or if I'm, spreading myself too thin, I just, because my social battery is pretty low, as is. And so I really limit myself to a few interactions a week, unless I'm super excited about stuff, or so I'm more of a lurker in most Discords. Like, I'll sit there and I'll check the updates, I'll read, but if it doesn't, like, if I feel like I don't contribute anything, I just don't, and that's okay. So and that's also something you can do when you join a group, is like, if you don't feel like you have anything to add, or if you don't feel like adding anything but you're in the group, I mean, so many Discords are like that, where you'll have 100 users and only 10 of them are active at a given time. It's just how it is. Yeah.
And those like 10 users will carry the torch of the Discord for a while, but every once in a while, those other people will pop in when it becomes relevant to them, or if they have the space in their life to participate.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So what strategies have you worked? I'm going to try that again. So what strategies have worked for you for turning these like online relationships and connections into collaborative opportunities like co-promotion or beta reading?
Well, I'm glad you asked. No, but I was a part of an anthology that the Secret Scribes put out called Locks and Keys. And we all, collaborated to write stories dealing with locks and keys and secrets. And that was a really cool project to work on, I think, last year. Yeah, it was last year. It was before the holidays and before Stella, the before times of the baby. So that was a really cool project that I got to work on. And we wrote the stories, and then Bill did the editing, and Lamia did the cover. And so it was all in-house. We didn't do a Kickstarter for it or anything. And it was just a lot of fun. I read all the stories, I enjoyed them, and I was able to offer feedback on some of them early. And then Willow Wraith Press, the other group I'm a part of, we're in talks about doing an anthology, because it's something that you can all collectively collaborate on and do together. And it's not just, these little Discords and stuff. You also have larger communities like, what is the Fanfi Attic? I kept trying to put an S in front of there. Is there Sci-Fi Fanfi? No. I don't know.
So it's Fanfi Attic, and then the podcast that like Adrian MJ and Greta do is SFF Addict.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, so that's why I was trying to throw an S on top of there.
No worries.
But so that is a reviewing blog, but they're kind of much more than that. They interact a lot behind the scenes, to my knowledge. They just recently did their own anthology.
Yeah.
And then you have like SFF, SFFI insiders, and all these
Another
acronyms.
good Discord group.
They're great. And I met a lot of, cool people in there. And at WorldCon this last year, I got to meet some of them. I met Bo, and super nice. And so you have this community that's sort of built, but like I said, it's only a fraction of like what's really out there as far as the indie space goes, which is crazy to think of, because in like our insular bubble, I feel like those two are just they're monoliths, right? You got SFI, and but in reality, there are other fish in the ocean, and there's so many other places. But I think those two are like the largest blogs. Well, Before We Go blog's pretty big, and Grimdark magazine, but that's like an established magazine, and there's so much stuff. It's easy to get overwhelmed. But yeah, and that's not even just normal collectives. That's, blogs and things that you as an author can probably be a part of as a reviewer if you try to reach out and stuff, because they're always looking for more reviewers.
And that's just in the like fantasy and sci-fi space. Like if you get into horror and romance and contemporary fiction and thriller, like there is a whole nother side of indie that I feel like I don't really even scratch the surface of, because I'm very insulated and I mostly interact with sci-fi, fantasy, and a little bit of romance. Like that's my area. That's where I like to hang. But I know there's so much more going on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I look at everything through the lens of fantasy, basically, because that's all I really enjoy. It's all I really enjoy writing. I've done a few projects where contests where New York City Midnight, where they give you a prompt and they give you a genre, and you have to write to that aspect. And I was like pulling teeth because I don't like writing contemporary history. Like that's not fun for me. So
So
I'm with you on everything I was saying was through the lens of fantasy. But you're absolutely right. There's so much more out there.
Even this podcast here, like grossly a majority, almost all is of the authors that I talk with are fantasy and sci-fi, and then a little bit of romance is thrown in there.
Yeah, just a dash, tasteful dash.
Exactly. Just dip your toes a little.
So in Crownfall, you got a tasteful dash of romance in it?
I will someday write something with heavier romance, but Crownfall has a very slow burn, spiceless romance in it. I will not say anything more about it because I don't want to give away who does, but it's very cute. And I love it. Okay. My wife cried reading parts of it, so I'm going to count that as a win.
Yeah, that's a win. That's a big win right there.
Yes, there are a few parts. So my wife is my editor.
Some of the tweets or the posts. Yeah,
that was so funny. So for people who don't know, I will constantly post the comments that my wife leaves in my book about tearing it apart, letting me know just how humble of a man I can be. But they are hilarious. And there are about 2 or 3 parts in the book where I got a good solid cry out of her, and I'm just like, okay, I'm doing something right here.
Yeah. Anytime you elicit emotion, whether it's grief, sadness, rage, when you make a reader throw the book or something, that's a win, right? That's the realest sense of a win.
Yeah, sometimes you get really frustrated with a book, but that is still satisfying because you're frustrated because the person you like is making dumb decisions. But that's what makes the story good, is sometimes they do dumb things. Yeah,
not everyone's perfect. They're not always going to do what you would do, and you're not perfect. So even if they would do what you would do, it's probably a bad idea.
It might not work out the way you intended. But circling back to the community and stuff like that, are there any underrated resources like newsletters or podcasts that help in finding and engaging in reading communities?
Maybe. So podcasts are great in general, right? Especially for finding groups of like-minded people. I would say YouTube channels, they're really good at building communities, right? Like a lot of those big fantasy YouTube channels also often have Discords associated with them. Really, Discord is your best friend when it comes to stuff like that, even with just interacting with other authors, because all of these different social platforms are really easy to get lost in the weeds on. But Discord while there are many different servers, it's just you can still add someone as a friend, and then for me it's just a lot easier to communicate straight through that. I'm trying to think if there is podcasts, review, blogs, social media in general. Those are really like the three main that I can think of. Newsletter swaps, Facebook groups are actually really good too.
What is a newsletter swap?
Right. So let's say I have a newsletter, right? Which I do, but I have a newsletter, and then let's say you have a newsletter, and we just are like, hey, I'm gonna like promo you in my newsletter and give a shout out, give a link to where they can sign up for yours, and give like details. That way your reader base or your audience has a chance to discover someone new that maybe they hadn't heard of before. So that's a really good way to shout out other creators, kind of like not kick the ladder down, but leave the ladder in place and then help pull it up. Yeah.
That's very different than kick the ladder down.
Very different. Some would argue the opposite.
Some would say that.
Oh,
I would
Greg's
be some.
just out here kicking down ladders. That's what I do.
How dare he? So the final question that I had for the evening on this topic, how has being part of a writing community, multiple communities at this point, evolved your writing process or motivation over time?
Okay, so writing process hasn't changed too terribly much, except now I have like core beta readers, more or less. Like some of the buddies in the group are basically like day ones, like, hey, put me down, I want to read it. Even like Alex, for instance, I'm doing his fantasy murder mystery. He really wanted to be a part of the beta stage for You Ate the Wild, but he just missed the window because he was busy with his own work. And so then he's like, hey, just give me the arc as soon as you can. Like, I definitely want to read it. And so that hasn't changed too terribly much. As far as motivation, it's really humbling when you have like a very successful author in your group, because you're like, wow, you are doing laps around us, which is completely fine. And I think that's how it should be viewed. A lot of people get bitter, or a lot of people feel entitled to like sales or success, and nobody's entitled to anything. I hate to break it to you. Like, you get 10 readers, you're in this economy, you're lucky to get those 10. You should just be happy that you have some. So being with more successful writers it's really cool to see, especially if like this is what they did. And a lot of times when you're in these groups, they'll break it down for you, like, oh, I actually didn't do anything special, this is what I did, it just sort of sparked off. Or like, yeah, I had this like TikTok marketing push, and my number, I had a video go viral, and then it just went from there. And it's like, okay, is that something you can replicate? You can try, but there's no guarantee it'll work, especially you're writing a different book than what they wrote, yada, yada. So I say it's humbling, but then it's also, sometimes you feel pretty good because like you have just a wide range of numbers. And it's not like we're not all posting our stats all the time, but give it like a monthly update, like, oh yeah, the month's been really rough, and you can commiserate because other people are like, yeah, it's actually been a really rough month, or I don't know what you're talking about, my month's been great, because it just varies. Book sales they're not a consistent thing. Sometimes you'll have a really banger month, and then sometimes it'll be kind of slow, and that's just the way it seems to go. And so motivation wise, yeah, it keeps you humble and hungry, being able to kind of share that experience with other people.
And I think that's one of my favorite things about the writing community in general, is how free with information everybody is. Because a lot of stuff is people just tried things and some of it worked and some of it didn't. And they're more than willing to share it with anybody who's willing to ask. I don't think I've never ran into a situation where I've reached out to someone and I've been stonewalled. I've always gotten the response of like, well, this is what I've tried, and this is what worked for me. This is what didn't work for me. People are very open about talking about their successes and their failures and why they think they were successes or failures. And I love that about the community. Again, it's iron sharpens iron.
Yeah, exactly. It's super helpful. Like, Bill is currently running a Kickstarter for Death Show Colossus, which is his upcoming release. And
yeah, it looks great.
I was able to beta read that, and it was a lot of fun. I think it's gonna potentially like really take off. It's one of those things where it just depends because of the market and stuff, but it definitely has potential. And so it's like for his whole Kickstarter process, we were just bouncing ideas back and forth, like, oh, what are you thinking the pricing is going to be? How are you going to set the tiers? What about the graphics? How are you doing X, Y, and Z? Because, you know, I was setting up mine while he was also setting up his. And that's another reason to, you know, make friends. Like, okay, I keep saying, like, find a community, a collective. Yeah. Okay, I guess you don't even really have to do all that, but it's helpful to have, like, a home base that you can go back to. At the minimum, try and make friends. I think, like, that's the minimum bar. Is the community is full of nice, wonderful people. Get out there, try and make friends. I know it can be scary. I know you might not have the bandwidth for it, but you're going to have a better time in this process if you have other people that you can communicate with, who understand what you're going through, who know what it's like to have a bad month, and who know what it's like to spend hours upon hours at a keyboard, sitting there hunched over, drinking coffee. It's like, people know. So it's good to have those people to commiserate and really make friends with.
That's perfect. And that is a great space to be ending this episode on, actually. Greg, where can the people find you? Where can they find your books?
Yeah, I'm all over social media. I think most of my handles are changed now to GJ Terral Writes. You can find my books, stationarymomentum.com, for direct sales from me. You can find every other book that I've been a part of, like Locks and Keys. You can find that on Amazon. I also recently released The Not So Mundane Mysteries of Norman Melbourne, which is a sort of murder mystery thingy. That was like November. And He Who Ate the Wild is currently on Kickstarter, probably currently on Kickstarter, I would imagine. And yeah, go ahead, check all that stuff out. If you like fantasy, that's basically all I do. So it's...
And he does it well, people. Check it out. Greg, thank you so much for coming on to the show this week and last week. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. Thank you.
Of course. And folks, until next time, let's be author adjacent together. See ya. And we did the thing again. We did the thing.